Coming up next on Tech News Weekly, I'm Jason Howell, joined by my co-host Mikah Sargent. Got some awesome interviews for you today, starting with why consumer technology isn't necessarily built with longevity in mind. Also, the unintended consequences of school content blockers, plus the Clubhousification of all social networks and deepfakes. They're coming for your geography next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 181, recorded Thursday, April 29th, 2021.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Headspace. Devoting just a few minutes per day to focus on your thoughts can absolutely change your life. Headspace is the easy-to-use app that can help you sleep, focus, act, and just be better. Go to headspace.com/TNW for a free 1-month trial.
And by Audible. Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment. Delve into your next title on Audible with Audible Plus. New members can try Audible Plus for 30 days. Download the Audible app and get started with a free trial at audible.com/TNW or text TNW to 500-500.
And by Casper. When it comes to a better night's sleep, Casper's new cooling collection has you covered. Focus on tomorrow. Let Casper handle the rest. Explore Casper products, mattresses, sheets, pillows, and more at casper.com/TWiT1 and use code TWIT1 for $100 off select mattresses. Offer excludes the snow mattresses. See casper.com for more details. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and a breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
I'm the other one, Jason Howell. How's it going, Mikah?
It's going well, Jason. It's going well today. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm psyched for this first interview. Well, I'm psyched for the entire show, but this first interview, the topic that we're going to dive into is something that I feel like I've thought about a lot, but after reading this article, it just put good words to these thoughts, this consideration. So we'll start here. Apple last week unleashed, as we know, I think we talked about it on the show plenty last week, an insane amount of new hardware products for consumers to delight in, as they usually do with Apple products. Last week also happened to be Earth Week. And compared against each other, they kind of highlight a pretty major and very mounting issue for this planet. And joining us to talk all about this is former co-founder and editor-in-chief of 10, Damon Beres, who wrote a fantastic op-ed for the New York Times on this topic. Welcome to the show, Damon.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. It's good to have some 10 alumni on. Appreciate you taking out time. And so this topic, this is an important one, right? Because it's not just, we're also used to, in the technology world, being passionate about technology, we're used to the next thing, the latest, the greatest, moving on. I can't even tell you how many smartphones I've had and have in a drawer, consequently. And yet at the same time, we're living on a planet that is, over time, kind of in many ways deteriorating and to a certain degree under the weight of all of this kind of consumer technology. So talk a little bit, maybe we can start with kind of the cognitive dissonance between Apple's hardware event and Earth Week. You kind of led your piece on that. So let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is indeed a cognitive dissonance. As I say, Apple, of course, talks quite a lot about sustainability, sustainable energy, etc. It releases an environmental report every year that talks about its supposed environmental commitments, many of which are very laudable. What it's not doing a very great job on, along with many other companies in the consumer tech space, is electronic waste, making sure that the devices that it creates and ships every single year last for as long as possible and are repairable by the greatest number of people. These are devices that are very difficult to open and repair. There is very little requirement, really Apple is not required at all to provide thorough documentation that shows independent repair shops how to repair these devices. And of course, through things like the iPhone upgrade program, consumers are put in a position where they are encouraged to get a new device on an annual basis. And even without participating in a program like that, you're getting maybe a couple or a few years out of these very expensive and wasteful electronics at best. So Apple, along with many other manufacturers, is kind of talking out of both sides of its mouth, where it's saying there are all of these things it's doing to be quote unquote sustainable, but then it's rolling out millions upon millions upon millions of these new devices every single year. And the Earth Week event really puts all of that into perspective. So it's talking about Earth Week, and then, hey, we have new Macs and we have AirTags and all of these new metal and plastic devices you can purchase now.
Yeah, so you actually write about planned obsolescence, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because to a certain degree, like I have a hard time finding how I feel about the idea of planned obsolescence. On one hand, I totally believe that it exists. You know, I've certainly had those moments with my device where I'm like, I can't believe this is doing this right now. Oh, this company totally knew this was going to happen. This is by design, right? It feels like a frustrating moment, and it's easy to point the finger. But then on the other hand, I'm like, is that like, would a company actually do that? Is this just some sort of like widely known conspiracy theory that we all just kind of point to planned obsolescence because it's the easy thing to point to? But I guess from a business sense, it makes sense. Maybe it's just not this like this nefarious thing when it's thought of. It's just business as usual. What are your thoughts on that?
Totally. So I think, first of all, you're correct in what you're kind of suggesting here, which is it's not necessarily like Apple has this kill switch and it's like, oh, it's been a year, shut the person's iPhone off, and now they have to buy a new one. You know, it's not happening like that. But what does happen, what we clearly see, is that hardware is obsoleted by software updates. So, for example, the new iOS update that happens every year often will remove a generation of iPhone compatibility. Apple's gotten a little bit better at this recently. The most recent version of iOS, I believe it supports back to the iPhone 6S, which at this point is a few years old. So that's kind of nice. But then again, wouldn't it be better if you could still be using an iPhone 5, for example, an iPhone 5C, whatever? The fact of the matter is that software updates will often remove a generation of hardware compatibility. So that's one example of this quote-unquote planned obsolescence. And then additionally, there are things such as the iPhone's battery health. That has clearly been a major issue. And what we have seen in the past is that Apple will, on the software side, throttle an iPhone that has an old battery that isn't at maximum capacity. And that's another way of obsoleting a device. So it doesn't need to be as obvious or as kind of cartoonishly evil as Apple sort of obliterating a bunch of devices. But there are these little things that kind of, in a sort of artificial way, move an iPhone or a MacBook out of compatibility and make it not work for consumers anymore, essentially.
Yeah, and we're talking a lot about Apple here, but obviously this is like a just technology industry-wide issue. This isn't just Apple that's doing this. When you mention battery, I mean, I'm on Android. I do an Android show here on the network, so I've played for the last 11 years. I've lived my life on Android, and I would say the number one thing that makes an Android device obsolete. Well, actually, I guess on Android it's two equal things, right? If it's an underpowered device, it can't keep up, from a hardware perspective, from a processing perspective. But really the thing that I point to the most is that battery. If I was to buy an Android device and want to keep this device for 5 years, let's say, which, let's be real, that should be possible. We should be able to spend as much as we do on these smartphones and keep them for 5 years and use them.
Totally.
But the battery is just not capable of withstanding that. After like a year and a half, we start to notice these huge dips in the battery capacity, and then we have to do other things to supplement it, get a a battery case or an external charger that we carry around with us, whatever the case is. And you're right, that's not a sustainable thing, depending, I don't know how it is on Apple, whether it's as steep as it is on Android.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because, so first of all, I talk about Apple a lot in my reporting around this issue because Apple is very much the trendsetter in the technology, the consumer tech industry in many ways. And additionally, Apple does talk quite a bit about its environmental commitments. And so that dissonance is always kind of interesting to me. But you are absolutely right that this is a major issue well outside of Apple's walled garden. In fact, many other companies, I think, do a worse job on this count. So you mentioned Android. Samsung, for example, their smartphones are perhaps more challenging than Apple's to service and repair. They come in strange form factors, folded or curved screens, for example, this proprietary kind of Samsung design. They're just as locked down as the iPhone is. So repairs are very challenging on those devices as well. Now, the thing that is interesting about the battery is that it used to be that phones, that computers, that a lot of consumer technology would have modular parts, or it would give the consumer the ability to pop the battery out and replace it with a new one if need be, right? Mm-hmm. Like old Nokia phones always let you do that, for example. Right. Now that everything is bolted in to your smartphone and glued down to the device and sealed in to this extremely small package that the consumer can't actually open themselves, if something goes wrong with the battery and it impacts your ability to use your device, you can no longer just pop that thing out and have a good as new phone. You have to get it serviced, or maybe you think that's not really worth it. It's a couple years old. I'm gonna buy the new thing, or I'm on the iPhone upgrade program anyway. I'll get the new iPhone when it comes out in 2 months. So the battery, it's a very interesting issue because we've seen that whole situation has evolved over the course of several years at this point and is a major driving factor for people replacing their technology.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Another thing that reading through your piece, you do spend a lot of time talking or writing about the right to repair and kind of the things that are happening with the French government, the repairability score. Here in the U.S., we're hearing about different pieces of legislation that are in the works about right to repair. How do you think this is going to influence these trends? Like, do you think it will make a marketable difference in how these companies are producing their products, taking the sustainability and longevity away from an afterthought, something they think about afterwards as like a problem that needs a solution after they've already released it, and more into the proactive space where they're designing these products to live longer?
Sure. So the most interesting thing about the right to repair legislation that we're talking about is that it will help the average consumer allow their device to last as long as possible, right? So what this legislation typically seeks is a company like Apple would have to provide schematic information, wiring diagrams, documentation that would allow an independent repair company or individual outside of just the sort of Apple authorized repair outlet that you might see driving around or whatever. It is designed to allow any independent repair organization or individual to access the information they need to fix a device like the iPhone. So what that ends up doing is it will help people like you and me find shops, find people who have the ability to actually fix their device when things go wrong to extend the longevity of that device, which is very important. And right now, in a lot of cases, I live in New York, you're in California, we are probably accustomed to saying, this isn't that big of a deal. There's tons of repair shops, whatever. But there are a ton of people throughout the US who don't have easy access to good repair options. And then they do have to go through a company like Apple or Samsung directly to get the thing serviced. This legislation is designed to fix that problem. As for whether that ultimately impacts how Apple, et cetera, designs their technology, I suppose that's a little bit hard to say. I would hope that it does have that effect where, maybe they decide, well, this information's out there anyway. We can make it easier to actually pop open the phone and repair the thing. Who knows if that happens? But that doesn't necessarily need to happen for there to be a positive impact in terms of device longevity. And as for what we're seeing in the EU and France with the repairability index score, that actually could influence how consumers purchase new devices, which, people, when the economic situation starts to change a little bit, that's when you might see something interesting in terms of how companies decide to design and release these products.
Yeah, and I know on the Android side of things, we've seen some pretty interesting efforts from the modular perspective. Now, none of it worked. None of it really, came out on the other end as like a total success. Google had its Project Aura. That really kind of fizzled before it ever got any sort of actual consumer movement. Moto mods, of course. Recently, in the last couple of years, we've heard about the Fairphone, which is kind of like a sustainable smartphone with modular parts and everything. But each time, it seems like while I completely appreciate the nerdiness and the intentions of these devices, it just kind of seems like the consumer, like the general consumer, isn't as interested in the idea, or maybe it's just a failure in marketing, but they never really seem to go anywhere. Do you think that's an idea that's just too far in advance of its possible like time to shine? Like maybe that's an idea that works in the next 5 years, but it was too early to do 5 years ago.
That's possible. I mean, listen, these are niche devices. So the Fairphone, for example, that product is still around. And in fact, one of the things that's really great about Android as an operating system is that a company like Fairphone can come along and decide, hey, we're going to build a phone with this OS and it's going to be modular and it's going to be a more quote unquote ethical phone than the one you might buy from Samsung. That's great. And that's one of the nice things about Android as compared to like iOS, for example. Only Apple can make the iPhone, right? In terms of consumer demand, I mean, listen, it's niche. Awareness around the issue of device longevity and repair, et cetera, is growing, and it has become a much larger issue in the past couple of years even. So the New York Times, they published an editorial about right to repair a couple of years ago, and then mine came around earlier this week. Like, that's a really mainstream thing. And maybe that helps people see this issue in more serious terms, and maybe that becomes a more marketable thing. But, at the end of the day, people also do love these products from Apple, Samsung, et cetera. These phones are nicer than the Fairphone. I mean, in terms of the sort of sleek design and the state-of-the-art features, et cetera, which matter to a lot of people. Nicer than those old clunky modular Motorola phones, even though those were wonderful from the sort of longevity perspective. But, I think more awareness can only help. And perhaps we do start to see that there's a shift here now that more people understand that, hey, maybe I should be interested in a more modular device or something that will last a little longer. Fundamentally, though, the big players in tech are the big players in tech, Apple, Samsung, et cetera. These are the companies they need to receive legislative pressure or otherwise to improve their practices rather than us waiting around and hoping that some much smaller organization is going to be able to design something that ends up becoming popular with a large consumer base. It's just not likely to happen that way.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Damon, such a pleasure getting you on the show today to talk about this important topic. And I love what you wrote. So everybody should check it out on the New York Times. In New York Times, nytimes.com. If people want to follow you online and the work that you're doing now, where can they find you?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at DLBeres. That's the best way to see what I'm up to. So give it a look. And thank you so much for having me on the show. This is great.
Absolutely. We'll be in touch. We'll be following your work. Thank you again, Damon.
Right.
Take care of yourself.
Thank you. You too.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks so much. All right. Up next, these content blockers for schools kind of missed the mark. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Headspace. Let's all take a breath in, take a breath out. Yes. Wouldn't it be great if there were a pocket-sized guide that helped you sleep, focus, act, and be better? Well, turns out there is. And as you can guess, it's Headspace. If you've got 10 minutes, Headspace can change your life. Headspace is your daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditations in an easy-to-use app. Headspace is one of the only meditation apps advancing the field of mindfulness and meditation through clinically validated research. So whatever the situation, Headspace really can help you feel better. Overwhelmed? Headspace has a 3-minute SOS meditation for you. Need some help falling asleep? Well, Headspace has wind-down sessions their members swear by. And for parents, Headspace even has morning meditations you can do with your kids. Headspace's approach to mindfulness can reduce stress, improve sleep, boost focus, and increase your overall sense of well-being. For a mood-boosting workout, you should check out Headspace Move. Just 30 days of Headspace lowers stress by 32%, and just 4 sessions can reduce burnout by 14%. That's right. I love this about Headspace. They said, look, we want to be able to say that this can actually change your life, but you can't just say that without backing it up, right? So they did the clinical research to make sure that they could say this. 32% of stress lowered in 30 days. That's so awesome. And 4 sessions reducing burnout, which is something we're all experiencing here in the pandemic times, by 14%. I think Headspace is fantastic. I particularly love all of the sleep stuff, all of the different options for sleep. They've got different sounds for sleep. They've got this thing called the Sleepcast, which includes some music and different background kind of atmospheric sounds. And then there are some ones for like if you accidentally wake up in the night and your brain is just rolling, and you're trying to fall back to sleep, that you can have that. So there's a lot of contextual stuff that I think is fantastic. Headspace is backed by 25 published studies on its benefits, 600,000 5-star reviews, and get this, more than 60 million downloads. Wow. Holy moly. That is incredible. Headspace makes it easy for you to build a life-changing meditation practice with mindfulness that works for you, on your schedule, anytime, anywhere. Look, you deserve to feel happier. And Headspace is meditation made simple. If you've struggled with it before, then you can check out Headspace because it's meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/TNW. That's headspace.com/TNW for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. You'll get the whole thing. This is the best deal offered right now. All you have to do is head to headspace.com/TNW today. Thanks so much to Headspace for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All righty, folks. I don't know about you, but I certainly remember. Maybe I'm just young enough to remember that back in high school, you'd go to the computer lab or to the library, which had computers, and I was kind of a goody two shoes, so I mostly just did the work that I was there to do. But there would be students who you'd look over and their computers had YouTube open or some other site open. Twitter wasn't as popular at the time, / not around, and so they were browsing through there. And then at some point, our school system got some content blockers in place for time wasters and other sites. And suddenly you couldn't access those sites anymore. And so you had to circumvent those through different means or just kind of deal with it. And so content blockers are nothing new in schools, but sometimes these algorithmic surveillance tools just miss the mark. And we are joined today by Todd Feathers, who's written over at Vice's Motherboard publication about content blockers truly missing the mark. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we are happy to have you here. So let's kick things off by talking about some of the different content blockers that you were investigated. And before we get into kind of where they missed the mark, maybe you can explain kind of what these content blockers are advertised to block. What are they meant to block as part of their systems?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned before, these have been around for a while. But there's kind of a new slew of companies that have popped up in the last few years, particularly in response and advertising themselves as ways to prevent things like school shootings, teen suicide, and protect kids from child predators. And so I looked specifically at two companies for this story, Bark and Securely, but there's a couple others that are really popular in schools. GoGuardian, Gaggle are some of the main ones. And some of them, like Bark, cater to both schools and they offer private options for parents to use on their kids at home. And these tools can do anything from just, block content or filter content on, browsers to monitoring everything that students type in emails, everything that they type into, Twitter, Facebook. And they're really, the way that they're described by a lot of privacy groups is spyware for children.
Gotcha. Spyware for children. And so, yes, they, at least in schools, are meant to kind of block things. And I think that this is an important thing. I want to kind of go a little bit deeper with you here, Todd, because back in the day, I remember that the content blockers were kind of nothing more than we block certain websites. And so the website itself was blocked, but it didn't go farther than that. So again, just to really point it out here, these are things that are like scanning what's on the computer. They're, monitoring every part of the child's activity, right?
Yeah. So for example, as part of the story, I bought a subscription to Bark's plan for children and used it on a test account where I sent myself various emails. I visited websites. I uploaded certain kinds of photos to Google Drive to see what would get caught and what wouldn't. And it really picks up a lot of stuff. And that's on my own device, but a lot of the times either deployed on school-issued Chromebooks where, the software essentially has, root access to everything that a student is going to do.
Gotcha. So then we've got to kind of get into the details here, the thing that really kind of made it stick out. Let's talk about what Motherboard did as part of the testing to determine that Bark and I can't remember the other one, that they kind of were blocking, perhaps one would argue, the wrong content based on what you sent. So could you talk a little bit about your investigative process here?
Yeah, absolutely. So this story started when a student who goes to a high school that uses Securely, which is the other company that we kind of investigated here as its web filtering platform. And the student reached out to us and said, I was doing some research for a couple school projects and, I was editing a Wikipedia article about a business. And I realized that a lot of the websites I was trying to visit that had to do with LGBTQ issues, with sexual health, and advocacy groups for sex workers were being blocked. And so he took it, on his own to go out and investigate a little bit more. He came up with this list of about 60 websites that he shared with us that had been blocked, by Securely, using his school-issued device, and that they included, some kind of inane things like gayrealtynetwork.com, which is just a website where you can go in and look for a LGBTQ real estate agent if that's what you would like to help you find a home. And you look at this website and really the only thing you can think of that would explain it being blocked is that it has the word gay on the homepage. But then, there are some more, sinister and damaging examples. There are websites for mental health organizations for teens that you cannot access if at least at the time that we started this investigation, that you could not access if your school was using Securely. So we use that data, and I confirmed that with some other sources who have access to securely. And then we separately tested Bark by, like I said, signing up for a subscription and just sending a bunch of emails with, various kinds of messages that you would hope, would get flagged and wouldn't get flagged. The lead of the story is, a message I sent to myself saying, I intend to join a neo-Nazi group, the Texas Rebel Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And Bark's CEO told us in an email that that message shouldn't have been flagged because it didn't contain enough context to indicate any kind of grooming or intention to join a white supremacy group.
Okay. That was one of the things that kind of stuck out to me was the amount of editorializing here a little bit, but also I do feel it's a little bit objective to say blatant gaslighting that was taking place whenever you reached out to these companies. One of the things that I really love about any of the work that's done from Motherboard is really trying to take any statement that the company makes and kind of try to verify it. And so there was one situation where the company claimed that their product helped to stop X number of school shootings in a given year or in a given period of time since it's been around. And after kind of inquiring about that, they moved that data or that statistic kind of out of the main part of it. Can you talk about then what happened whenever I believe it was the CEO or somebody got back to you and said, look, we turn around that data all the time. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So that particular statistic, which was displayed, it was essentially the first thing that you would see if you went to Bark's homepage, was that the company had, and I think this is almost a direct quote, if not a little bit paraphrased, prevented 16 school shootings or helped prevent 16 school shootings, which is a really bold claim, but you can see why if you're a parent or if you're a school administrator, that is the kind of thing that would really help sell you on a product. And that number has been bothering me for a couple of years, almost 2.5 years now. I'd done a story previously about these kinds of companies and tried to fact check that claim and really couldn't get anything conclusive on it. So when we set out to do the story again, I really wanted to make sure that we tried to get some kind of answer to that. And we asked Bark for any documentation or evidence or anything that could help us verify that 16 school shootings prevented number. And then we also asked just for, the definition of what do you mean by prevented? Are you saying that Bark is the reason this didn't happen, or just that Bark, caught something that was part of a long chain that prevented a school shooting from happening? And Bark didn't provide any evidence. They didn't provide any real explanation for how they reached that 16 number. What they did do is they removed it from the prominent place on the homepage. And the CEO, again, in an email wrote to us that, they regularly rotate these stats. And in a certain sense, that's true. The two other stats that accompany it are, the number of children that the company says that they protect currently. And I think the other one is, number of dangerous incidents or something detected. And those periodically go up. As you would assume, the company gets more customers. But the school shooting number has stayed the same for all of 2021, according to a review of the times it's been saved on the Internet Archive. So they haven't been rotating that until they were asked about it.
Yeah, that was a really interesting piece of the story that I thought was important to point out. At the end of the day, we've got these algorithmic methods of trying to block and unblock certain content, and you talk about filtering morality. Could you talk a little bit more about that portion of your piece?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to what you started with in the intro is, the days when we would go into the computer lab and, my website that I would use during my time on the computers was addictinggames.com. You could play all kinds of stupid little games on there, right? And during that time when I was in school and using that, the content was being filtered. There was a web filter in place. There's a 2000 law There a law that was enacted in 2000 that requires all public schools and libraries that want to receive a certain kind of funding from the federal government to deploy some kind of web filter that blocks, children from accessing harmful content. Now, what constitutes harmful content is really not explained in the law, and it hasn't been litigated to a very high degree of clarity. So for years, we've come across situations where libraries and schools would buy a product where they could click a box that would say, block any content related to alternative lifestyles or sexuality, which is, I think on the face of it, pretty discriminatory. And that's been challenged, but only in the context of an administrator purposefully going in and saying that you can't access this content and a human making that decision. But what's different now is that, algorithms are making these decisions, and algorithms are imbued with, human bias. And some of that bias is fed back into companies like Securely and Bark's web filters because they take feedback from administrators. And if a school tells them that, we don't want our students to be able to access this website, they may block it. And then it's blocked for not just that school, but schools across the country.
Yes. Todd Feathers, I want to thank you so much for your time today and also for covering this piece. Everybody should go read it over on Vice's Motherboard publication. If folks want to follow you online and stay up to date with your work, where can they go to do so?
You can follow me on Twitter at Todd Feathers.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Todd. All right. Coming up, we're going to jump into our stories of the week, starting with the fact that Clubhouse seems to be everywhere. We're not just talking about Clubhouse. We're talking about their features appearing, it seems like, on all services. That's coming up. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Audible. And I'm so happy to have Audible back because Audible's just so dang easy to talk about because I've been an Audible subscriber for so many years. My library is huge, and I always have a fun audiobook or an interesting audiobook as a recommendation. So I love these reads. If you have a recommendation, Mikah, hold on to it. I'll ask you about that in a few moments. But first, if you've ever wanted to read a memoir, or maybe you just didn't have the time to read, well, maybe you found a title that you couldn't put down, but you also need to, do other things, wash the dishes, fold the laundry. Well, now you can do both because Audible makes it possible. When you're driving, cooking, cleaning your house, just relaxing even, you can listen to amazing audio files with Audible. Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment, all in one place. At Audible, you can find the largest selection of audiobooks, ranging from, of course, bestsellers and new releases to celebrity memoirs. That's probably half of my library. Languages, business, motivation, and more. You can get original entertainment from top celebrity creators, thousands of popular and binge-worthy podcasts, and they're now offering their newest plan, which is called Audible Plus. Now, Audible Plus gives you full access to their popular Plus catalog, and you get so much with that. Audible Plus is really all about giving members a chance to listen to and discover new favorites, of course, and explore different formats, things like the exclusive Words and Music series or a podcast maybe that you've never considered before. Also, even theatrical performances. I mean, it's a wide gamut that you can choose from. You can listen all you want to thousands and thousands of popular audiobooks, original entertainment, podcasts, including ad-free versions of your favorite shows and exclusive series. And they're all available, of course, to download, or you can stream them. So you can really just listen to them anywhere you happen to be, anytime on any device, and you'll never lose your spot. To use your Audible membership, you will need to download, of course, the Audible app. The Audible app is free. It can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. And it's not just your access to your own library of audiobooks and audio content, but it's also really cool ways to play them. Like if you're driving, it has a special driving mode where it takes only the essential buttons and makes them large so that you're not fumbling with these tiny little, words on the screen. It's very easy to use when you're behind the wheel. And this is the part of the Audible ad that I always love because it's always fun to check in on some of our favorite audiobooks. And one that I'm listening to right now is an audiobook by Elizabeth Gilbert. She was the author of Eat, Pray, Love. And this audiobook is not new. It's called Big Magic. It's not necessarily new. I think it came out like 3 or 4 years ago, but it's so good. Like it's just such a great look into it's one of those audiobooks that as I listen to it, I realized like I wanted to write or record something like this, but turns out Elizabeth Gilbert, beat me to the punch. It's all about creativity and about like what it is on a human level to be creative beings and to just realize that, humanity is based around creativity. So, if you know anyone who's ever said, oh, I'm just not a creative person or whatever, that's baloney. We're all creative. It's just, you might not be creative at making music or drawing, but you're creative because humanity has to be creative in order to exist. That's just how we exist, is we are creative beings. And it's just a really inspiring look at like what makes us alive as creative beings. I listen to it and it makes me want to create. And that's just an amazing audiobook as far as I'm concerned. Anything that inspires me like that. What do you have any recommendations, Mikah? Anything that's caught your ear?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got a huge audiobook library as well. But the series that I'll point to, I love fantasy audiobooks quite a bit. And so I want to talk about Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series. It is one of the most incredible fantasy audiobook series I think I've ever listened to, ever read. It is it just guides you down a path, and then suddenly things change, and nothing is ever what you expect. And the whole series kind of kicks off with this idea that there's this prophesied hero. There's this hero that was supposed to sort of save the world who failed a long time ago and ends up becoming this dark lord. And it's kind of about what's happened since then, and kind of what do you do whenever the prophesied hero is not the hero. It's just, I can't, I love the Mistborn series. So if you like fantasy at all, and kind of those little bits of building up a story, with lots of there may be magic or some sort of powers, but it's all based in a rule set and kind of building out world building and all of that kind of thing, you would really like Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series. I've gifted the first audiobook from the series to Leo, because this was long before Audible was a sponsor during my time here, because I was very insistent on him listening to that audiobook.
These aren't short audiobooks either. They're like 24 hours, 28. These are thick.
Very long, which I love because basically that's how I fall asleep at night, actually, is listening to audiobooks. And there's not any travel for me right now, but in my downtime when I am, doing the dishes or basically when there's not something that requires my ears, there's probably an audiobook playing. So I am constantly listening to audiobooks. Audible, it fills my life, and I'm very happy about it because I have read more content than I ever have before, thanks to Audible.
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. Great picks. Listening to Audible is going to do for you what it does for Mikah and I. It's going to make you feel inspired, connected. It's just awesome. And it's all available all in one app. Audible Plus is your playlist for life. What are you waiting for? Just dive into your next title on Audible with Audible Plus. New members can actually try Audible Plus for 30 days. All you got to do is download the Audible app and get started with a free trial at audible.com/TNW, or you text TNW to 500-500. That's AUDIBLE, audible.com/TNW, or text TNW to 500-500, and you'll start your free 30-day trial today. And we thank Audible for their support, and welcome back to the TWiT Network, Audible. It's awesome to have you all back. All right. Mikah, let's start with your story of the week. What you got?
Yeah, so Instagram has updated its app, or is updating its app so that Instagram Live, which is a service it's had for a while where you could stream live to viewers, either by yourself or with a group, they're adding options to mute so that it's just video, or turn off the video entirely so that it's just audio. TechCrunch has written about this. Sarah Perez over at TechCrunch has written about this and kind of shows or compares it to Clubhouse as a means to basically bring the Clubhouse style audio hangout to Instagram without having to create a whole new product. So it's not Instagram audio or Instagram spaces or Instagram club or anything like that. It is just Instagram Live, which we already have, but now you can turn off your video and just do audio. What I find fascinating about this is, everybody's been saying it, and so it's not new for me to say. Clubhouse is a feature, not a product. It is, it's a thing that anybody who has a platform can do, and it's just about who can do it well. And Clubhouse certainly in the beginning got a lot of attention because it was exclusive, because they were clever about getting kind of celebrities to be on the platform and talking. So you wanted to be there more than other places. But as time has elapsed, other services are often set up already to take advantage of this because they've gone farther than this by having, group video. And so they're like, wait, so people don't necessarily want group video, they just want group audio. Well, we can make that happen. It's very easy to do. And so they just make it so that you can turn off your video in some cases. Or in Discord, for example, there's a stages feature, which lets you do what you can do with Clubhouse. Twitter launched Spaces. And I'm not sure if everybody has it now, but I know a lot of people have it now. I got an opportunity to check it out pretty early on, but I didn't use it very often just because I'm already on camera. It's too much. My voice is already on the line too much. So
yeah, right.
It's like, I don't need any more of that. I'm already doing enough of that. But a lot more people have that now and are taking advantage of it. So I'm not surprised that Instagram is as well. I've seen rumors of LinkedIn maybe adding or I can't remember, maybe they already do. But certainly thinking about adding it to its platform. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Slack add some version of that to its platform. So all this is to say, I am not at all surprised that that it's very simple to add this feature and that lots of people are doing it, because it's not one of those egregious I'm stealing your idea situations, because at the end of the day, Clubhouse is just a place for people to gather and speak to one another through, their phones or what have you. And that is not a new technology. It's just that Clubhouse kind of went viral a little bit. I think it's the virality that really made it take off. So it's not hard for these other services to go, we can do that too. And I brought this question up a while back on the podcast I do on Wednesdays called Clockwise. And during the show, I kind of brought up when one of the other places, I think it was right when Twitter was launching Spaces, is it more important for you to have a place where you can go where the one thing they do is whatever the feature is? So in this case, audio. So is it more important for you to have Clubhouse, which specializes or, arguably specialized in audio communication, or is it more important for you to have those features brought to the services that you use that you're already on? And everybody was saying, I'd rather have it where I am. I don't want to have to create a new account. I don't want to have to find a new context. I don't want to have to go here. Let's enable these features where I am already. And that's no surprise, because as much as some humans love to say, I love change, I live for change, I thrive on change, change fuels me. the fact is our base lizard brains are pre-wired to dislike change, to dislike context switching, to dislike those kinds of things. So we are more happy with being in the places that we are already, and to have those features turned on there. So yeah, I'm curious, Jason, sort of without considering some of the things I've just said, perhaps, when you have seen these different services turning on Clubhouse style features, did you feel just, off the top like they were stealing Clubhouse's features? Or did you kind of feel like, well, Clubhouse is not anything special, so of course they are? Kind of what was your initial sort of reaction to these different places enabling Clubhouse style features?
I think my initial reaction has been there's obviously something special about what a company like Clubhouse has done, because prior to Clubhouse doing it, it didn't exist, or it didn't exist to the scale that it is now. Clubhouse suddenly comes out with this feature set, and then suddenly, I mean, it's obvious they had something, because you've got Instagram, you've got Twitter, you've got Facebook that announced its tool set, LinkedIn's announced its tool set, and it's all happening after Clubhouse. So it's obvious that Clubhouse had something. I would absolutely have to get the hat tip to Clubhouse for taking this idea and making it something that everybody else has to do. At the same time, I'm totally not surprised that everybody else has to do it. I think when it comes to social media, the challenge is for any social media network is, how do we make sure that we have enough users here to do and keep them here so that they can do all the things that they want to do and that we want them to do? Twitter has a huge, following, people contributing to the service. Obviously, Facebook does. These companies have a wide user base, and they're looking for new ways to engage them. So when a feature like this happens, at this point, I've just kind of grown to assume that there's going to be so much copycatting going on that, I don't know if that's fair or not, because a company like Clubhouse, if they were the ones that got there first, there's a part of me that feels like, hey, they should get their piece of the pie because they were the ones that created it. Yet at the same time, I totally realize, like, as a user, I would prefer to not use 10 different services. I struggle using one service enough.
Right.
Like, I was just looking at my Twitter profile earlier and realized I haven't tweeted in like 5 days. And I suddenly found myself having like a little Twitter guilt, like, oh, I've really let myself down on Twitter. I've not committed enough to that. I have a hard enough time committing myself to one service, let alone all the service. That's been my longest standing struggle with Instagram. I love Instagram. I love the idea of Instagram and the fact that just Instagram tends to, present kind of a more positive side of life than networks like Facebook and everything. But I struggle to contribute to it because I just in my daily life have little bandwidth to spread myself that way and also do something that's very important to me, which is staying connected in the now that's right in front of me, being connected with my friends, my family that are here, and not always pulling out the phone because I feel like this thing is so important, I've got to put it out. I'm kind of jumping all around the board. I realize I'm not talking exactly about Clubhouse in this point, but how I can tie it back is to say that, yes, Twitter has that, and Twitter would be the social network that I use more than any other network. But I've never used it. Like, I've never once used it. Even though they offer it there, I've never once opened up a space and done that. And that just really ties back into kind of the commitment I've made to myself to not live my life on a social network and to focus more in the now.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you on the, like, having all these different social networks and different places one is meant to exist online. I for the most part, don't feel that guilt, but certainly that the awareness of it. It's like, oh, wow, I haven't said anything in a long time, or the only thing I've done is retweet some different things that have been posted. And yeah, you definitely become a little bit more aware of it. But in any case, I think Clubhouse, while it was first, it's really going to have to do some deep thinking and some sort of soul level. Yeah, exactly. It needs to figure out what it can do to continue to be different and worthwhile to people if it wants to kind of keep up with everybody else who's go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but you made me realize one thing, which is that like I do want Clubhouse to recognize, or it's not like I want them to recognize something, but I do think that there is always the option when you are in a position that Clubhouse is in to come out the other end as like a target for one of these other major companies. Is probably not their ultimate goal, right? Like when you're launching a social network, you probably always want it to be the thing that survives because then you have maximum control on everything. But it really does seem like there's some similarities between what Clubhouse has done and what the social networks have done. And what was the live video streaming thing? Meerkat and Periscope, and kind of the trajectory of that followed a very similar trajectory where it came out. It was like, oh yeah, these other social networks aren't doing that. But Meerkat and Periscope are. And then they became an acquisition target. You know, of course, Periscope ended up going to Twitter. And I think very recently, Twitter actually ended up shutting down Periscope. So that tells you kind of the short-term kind of lifespan of some of these features. Maybe Clubhouse will be in that category as well. But that is an option. So maybe that ends up being the payoff. Maybe their service isn't built around an idea that is fully sustaining for the next 20 years on its own, but they end up getting acquired by one of these other companies. I'm not saying I'm pushing for that, but as an owner of one of those businesses, that is another option as opposed to just being completely put out to the wolves because these other services eat your lunch. Maybe they can buckle down enough on the technology to be valuable to others if they can't figure out how they make themselves valuable for the long term. And I'm not sure where that lands. I don't know that I necessarily see 20 years down the line a Clubhouse being the major social network of, for whatever reasons. It's kind of hard for me to think that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing all the different sites that add the same kind of feature in the future, and we'll see how Clubhouse comes out of it in the end. Up next, we have Jason's story of the week. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by the ever comforting, the ever awesome Casper. Love your tomorrow with Casper. The new Casper Cooling Collection, listen to that alliteration, has everything you need to help you sleep cool all night long. Casper's mattresses with new snow technology, hyperlight sheets, lightweight duvets, and breathable mattress protector are all designed to keep you cool and comfortable so you can't help but love your tomorrow. Tomorrow is a new day, so you can make the most of it with Casper's Cooling Collection. Casper's Wave Hybrid Snow Mattress keeps you cool for 12 plus hours, pulling heat away from your body for sustained temperature regulation, a cool to the touch feeling, and a much improved tomorrow. Better bedding makes for a better tomorrow, which is why Casper's Hyperlight Sheets are designed with an innovative grid weave that lets air flow through for maximum breathability. The lightweight duvet provides optimal temperature control without sacrificing plush comfort. Casper's breathable mattress protector improves the coolness of the bed even further by allowing air to flow between your body and the mattress. All of these are designed to work together to prevent overheating all night, because cooler sleep means better sleep. This is 100% true, and better sleep means better tomorrows. Folks, I did a sleep podcast for a good period of time, and unfortunately my co-host and I had to disband the podcast after a while for other reasons. But while we were doing that show, we were both reading peer-reviewed research about sleep, reading books about sleep. I learned quite a bit about sleep, and the temperature of the bedroom is incredibly important for a good night's sleep. It's also really good for your health, because when you sleep cool, your body produces more of something called brown fat. And brown fat is a very unique type of lipid that will actually help you burn calories, which is kind of incredible. You can learn more about brown fat by doing a study, or by doing a search for brown fat and sleep. But I think it's so important to talk about sleep and coolness, because your body changes temperatures over the course of the night, your heart rate changes, your breathing changes. And so keeping a consistently cool room is actually very good for your sleep. And I'm excited about picking up these Casper sheets because the non-Casper sheets I have right now are not very breathable. And it would be nice to have this cool hyperlight design. And as always, Casper will offer you free shipping and free returns. When it comes to a better night's sleep, Casper's new cooling collection has you covered. Focus on tomorrow. Let Casper handle the rest. Get it? Get it? The rest? Explore Casper products, the mattresses, the sheets, the pillows, and more at casper.com/twit1 and use code TWIT1 for $100 off select mattresses. That's code TWIT1 for $100 off select mattresses. Offer excludes the snow mattresses. See casper.com for more details. Thanks so much to Casper for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly and for sponsoring my sleep. So appreciate it. All righty, Jason Howell, what is your story of the week?
Oh, sorry. I was just staring at my Casper mattress. It's just right there. My Casper pillows. I was just thinking, gosh, it's so comfortable. Maybe I'll just take a nap. I'll wait until after the story of the week, though. We'll go ahead and put that off for a moment here. Nap incoming, just not quite yet. Deepfakes. I love talking about deepfakes. I'm fascinated by them. Often when we think about these things, we immediately think of images of people who don't actually exist or video of people who do actually exist, but doing things they didn't actually do. Well, researchers are apparently, they're taking time to look into and ponder the possible effects of deep-faked geography, which is something I hadn't really considered before today, before reading this article. Initially, I read an article on The Verge that caught my attention about this. And that is artificial intelligence creations of cityscapes, of landscapes, and of things that are maybe they're purported to be actual satellite imagery. And you may be wondering, well, what's the harm in that? Like, the world is large. There are a whole lot of areas that look a whole lot of ways. Why does it matter if there's a tree over there or whatever the case may be? But I think it's a really interesting kind of thing to take a look at, especially as people aren't aware of what could possibly happen out of this, so that we can move forward in this world of deepfake technology and protect against it, right? So for example, creating hysteria around things like wildfires in an area where none exists, or pretty much the same with any natural disaster. Geopolitical risks, misleading certain governments into maybe an unnecessary action or leading them into inaction based on some sort of satellite imagery that that is faked. For example, satellite imagery of China's Uyghur detention camps. Chinese government could claim them to be faked as deep-faked geography becomes just more prevalent. And I think that's kind of what I find really fascinating about deepfakes, outside of the sheer kind of capability of what's happening with the technology and just how good it's getting at faking things. But often the threat isn't that this actually fake thing that you're looking at could be seen as real, right? Like it's fake, but it could be real. It's the other way around. What if what you're looking at is proof that anything that you look at is at least plausibly unreal? So it's the doubt that it seeds into the landscape. It's not necessarily that it's convincing you that this fake thing is real. It's that when we know that we can fake something so that it looks real, then anything that is real is doubtable. And that's the really scary thing, right? So I go down these wormholes when I think of deepfake technology, and I find myself kind of conflicted with it because I'm totally fascinated by the potential and the possibility of deepfake and artificial intelligence and what it can do with, we've talked many times on the show about creativity and everything like that. And so on one hand, I want for it to be fostered from that perspective, because I never considered just how powerful a tool this could be for so many things that are positive. But the negative sides of these are equally as as dire, let's say, by comparison, and have the potential to do a whole lot of bad things depending on whose hands it falls into. I don't know. I have more on this, but what do you think about the potential of deepfake geography? Is that anything you've ever thought about or considered before, Mikah?
Honestly, no. So I mean, I've always just focused on the deepfakes, and I think that part of that is because that's the virality of it is deepfakes surrounding people, and those kinds of situations where you are. I guess it gets to like, what is the goal of a deepfake? And what we've seen so far is to kind of impersonate a person, to try and make a person say something that they didn't say or do something that they didn't do. And so thinking about a whole nother level of deepfake is pretty concerning, and also just kind of makes you go, great, now that's one more thing I can't just trust to be accurate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Verifying things is even more difficult than it ever has been.
Yeah. Well, and along those lines, the people who created, who kind of led this research, was led by Bo Zhao. He's an assistant professor of geography at the University of Washington. They researched this topic deeply, but they also created detection software for it, which we've seen and heard about detection software for deepfakes when it comes to kind of face portraits and that sort of stuff. There's software that exists in order to create it, because to the human eye, it's very difficult to look at some of these images and see immediately that something looks out of place. At least with the human face, at least there are clues that we can like clue into. And
right.
Be like, oh, why is the reflection in the eye over here on this eyeball and straightforward on this one? That, and whether we recognize it or not, that doesn't sit right, and that creates kind of our doubt of trust in that particular faked image. Well, there's software that can do that for you that's way more way better at it than we are by looking at it. With geography, it's a little different. With geography, it's like, I don't know, it just looks like a bunch of trees. It's not like you knew that one tree was not supposed to be there. It was actually over here.
Especially given that they're already low quality images. Like, we're used to just low quality images.
That's true. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I don't. It's not in the same way where with humans, there's an uncanny valley situation, and oftentimes you can just tell a little bit. But with this, it's like you're already looking at those CAPTCHA style images where, is that a fire hydrant? I'm not sure if I should click on that.
Is that a bus? Apparently their software, analyzes texture, color, contrast, and things like that. The big challenge for software that does this, though, is that it's really an arms race, right? Deepfake technology continues to progress and get better and better. And I have to imagine at a certain point, deepfake technology is going to solve the eyeball problem, the reflection. They're going to figure that out. And so the people maintaining these detection algorithms, they also need to keep on it, keep developing it so that it stays up to date with the current trends that are happening. It's a total arms race. That was interesting. It also kind of made me think a little bit about just like historically, just the fact that geographic data has been fabricated in many ways. Specifically, map data has for so long been very inaccurate. That the world map that we're so used to seeing, that we were taught in schools and everything, is actually not a correct representation of the world. From my understanding, the size of the U.S. when compared to all the other continents and everything, on the standard world map that you see, everything is skewed to make the U.S. seem bigger and bolder by comparison. But when you take a look at a different representation, like the Peters projection map, you get a better sense of kind of the proper scale by comparison. You end up seeing that the United States and Canada and everything is really squished and kind of small compared to a lot of other continents that are way larger by comparison. And this is just something that we're kind of instructed and taught in schools, and we don't question because we don't know to question. And thankfully now with the internet, we know more about that sort of thing. But so this isn't uncommon to be faking geographic information. It's just another way to do it, I suppose.
That's a really good point. Historically, It's always, there are some really funny maps. I can't remember. I've seen them on Tumblr. I've seen them occasionally on Twitter and sometimes on Reddit. And the rare time I dip my toe into those choppy waters, where it's a map. Yeah. Where it's a map somewhere that is just, depending on where it is, their country is like super huge and everybody else's are really shrunk down. Yeah. Historically, that's kind of always been a factor. But it is interesting to kind of compare that these sort of deep fakes have always existed and are so insidious. I mean, it's in my mind, I have this picture of what the United States looks like in comparison to some of the other countries. And by God, they make Africa so small in these maps that I've, grown up looking at in geography classes and stuff. It's kind of wild.
It is, yeah. So this is actually the Gall-Peters projection, which is just one of the alternative maps that attempts to scale things at a more even scale. And
it's like Australia is that big? Are you serious? You know what I mean?
Right? Exactly. It's crazy when you look at it this way, and you're like, okay, yeah, this looks very different from what I was taught as a kid, and what we're still very used to seeing in a common way. So. Anyways, so it's nothing new. It's just the new technology way of faking our geography.
Everything's fake and nothing is real.
Yay.
That's my jingle. That's my jingle for this millennia.
Right. That's true. I wonder when we'll move beyond that to a different paradigm. I don't know. Hopefully soon, but I doubt it. All right. We've reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. We publish this show every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That is where you can go to subscribe to the show, audio, video formats. Jump out to YouTube and subscribe there. Everything you need to know, basically, at twit.tv/TNW.
And if you want all of our shows ad-free, that's right. This is so exciting. If you want to listen to our shows ad-free and miss me talking about Casper's amazing mattresses, I understand. You should check out Club Twit. It's $7 a month, and it gets you every Twit show with no ads, plus an exclusive Twit Plus feed with extra content that you wouldn't get otherwise, including some pre- and post-show stuff, but also some other magic they'll be working in as we continue rolling along. And some people think it's sort of a secondary thing, but anytime I've ever subscribed to a membership, this was always my favorite thing about it. So I am very pumped to say that we also have a members-only Discord server where you can join and converse with us and hang out. And Leo has already had several situations during the show where he will bring people up on stage, so to speak. It's a little clubhousey, to ask questions of the hosts. And I know that Leo and Lisa have done a few inside Twit streams there in the clubhouse, in Club Twit. So honestly, maybe ad-free is the thing that you're pumped about. Maybe it's the other stuff. But for me, I have always loved being part of a Discord or a Slack, whatever it happens to be. And so I'm really pumped to say that we've got a Club Twit Discord where you can hang out with us, chat with us, and get even more than you normally would. And all that is available to you for $7 a month. I'm really excited about that price. It's a really good price. You just head to twit.tv/clubtwit to hang out. And we hope to see you there in the Discord. Let us know. If you want to tweet at me, by the way, I am at Mikah Sargent on Twitter and at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks I can find. And of course, check out Smart Tech Today here in not very long, in a little over an hour. Or tomorrow, you can check out iOS Today, which I record every Friday at 11 a.m. with Rosemary Orchard. So yeah, thank you. And Jason Howell, what about you?
Just find me on Twitter. Like I said, I apologize. I haven't tweeted in a while, but when I choose to, you'll find them at Jason Howell on Twitter. Also do All About Android here on the Twit Network, and then produce a bunch of Leo shows. So even if you don't see me on Twit or This Week in Google or Security Now, I'm behind the scenes making it happen. So anyways, check out all the awesome content that we have here. And big thanks to everyone behind the scenes making this show happen. John Ashley at the studio, Burke at the studio, of course, and behind the scenes, like on the other side of this glass or this microphone. And that is you for watching and listening every week, because without you, we wouldn't have a show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I want to tell you about my show, Hands on Photography, here on TWiT TV. Each and every week, Thursday that is, I like to sit down and share with you the best tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer. And it's not always about Photoshop. It's not always about just having the biggest and baddest and bestest camera. It can be the simplest of things, like leave your eye open when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of these simple tips can really help step your photography game up. So subscribe to the show today. That's twit.tv/hop. And I look forward to talking to you soon.